They told me I had to sell my home, that I no longer belonged among the perfect lawns and identical smiles of Meadowbrook Estates. So I left. I left the keys, the furniture, the silence they demanded of me. But houses remember things their owners forget. Mine remembered everything, every fine, every whispered threat, every sleepless night under the glow of their cameras. Now no one can live there. Not the buyers, not the board, not the men who once measured my grass blade by blade. Because some homes don't forgive. Some homes learn. I remember the first time I drove through Meadowbrook Estates. The streets shimmered like porcelain under a washed afternoon sun, the kind of light that made everything look more expensive than it was. The houses seemed to hum in quiet pride, their lawns shaved to identical perfection, mailboxes gleaming in obedient rows. I thought I'd found peace there. After years of cramped apartments and flickering fluorescent kitchens, this was meant to be stability. But I didn't yet understand that perfection always asks for a sacrifice. At first, I mistook silence for comfort. The neighborhood had rules that seemed harmless: no unapproved exterior paint colors, no visible trash bins, no vehicles parked overnight on the street. I admired the order. The HOA brochure spoke of community harmony, of shared aesthetic values. They made it sound like beauty was democracy. But beauty, I'd learn, was their currency, and every neighbor paid in fear. I met them all that first week. The committee chair, the treasurer, the enforcers. They smiled too tightly, each grin like a warning hidden inside welcome. They praised my hedges, my porch lights, my careful compliance. I thought I'd joined something orderly. In truth, I'd entered something that fed on obedience. Days folded into weeks. I learned the rhythm of Meadowbrook, the early morning sprinklers sighing in unison, the synchronized garage doors lifting like mechanical flowers, the mail delivered to boxes that looked cloned. I fell into the routine easily. Every rule obeyed, every detail polished. For a time, I felt almost proud to belong. But there's a point where comfort begins to feel like surveillance. I started to notice the emails, the automated reminders about my lawn's moisture uniformity, the notes tucked under the doormat about garbage lid alignment. Someone was always watching. Cameras perched discreetly on porch corners. Security patrols rolled silently through the night, their headlights sweeping like searchlights through curtains. Then there were the meetings. Monthly gatherings in the clubhouse where residents sat beneath fluorescent lights, sipping coffee that tasted like cardboard. We voted on paint palettes, mailbox dimensions, and shrub height limits. The president, Mr. Albright, read minutes like a sermon, his voice smooth and final. Dissent wasn't forbidden exactly, but every question was met with a long, cold silence that hollowed the air. I told myself this was normal, that order needs rules. But beneath the surface of every polite nod was a quiet hostility, a whispered warning that individuality was the first sin. I began to notice patterns. Residents who painted their doors a shade too dark vanished within months, homes relisted. Foreclosure whispered like a curse. Cars that dared park overnight on the curb were towed before dawn. One morning, a house across the street woke up with its lawn sprayed in red letters. Violation. No one spoke of it, but we all saw it. And yet every yard stayed perfect. Every flower bloomed obediently. The HOA fees rose, notices multiplied. There was always a new initiative, a landscaping upgrade, a security assessment, a lighting improvement. The board said it was for the good of all. But somehow, the good of all always meant money flowing in one direction. I paid. Everyone paid. And we smiled while doing it because that was the only way to survive in Meadowbrook. When I wasn't working, I wandered the house, learning every sound it made, the sigh of vents, the hum of the smart thermostat adjusting temperature on command. The place was alive in its own quiet way. It listened. It learned. I'd installed a full smart home system, motion sensors, speakers, ambient lighting. It was my hobby then, something to make the house feel more responsive, more mine. I never guessed how much that would matter later. By autumn, Meadowbrook's peace began to taste metallic. Neighbors stopped making eye contact. The board's patrols grew more frequent. I saw their cars linger outside longer than before. And once, when I came home late, I found a note taped to my door. Your grass length exceeds HOA standards by 0.75 inches. Please address immediately. No name, just the seal. 3 silver leaves encircled by the motto, Perfection in Unity. That night, as the sprinklers whispered in the dark, I looked through my window and realized I didn't know who my neighbors really were. Behind every neat hedge, there was fear. Behind every lighted window, someone hiding from it. I should have left then, but leaving would mean admitting defeat, and the HOA counted on that. They thrived on submission, on small humiliations that felt too trivial to fight. So I stayed, promising myself I'd endure, that rules couldn't touch what mattered most, the sense of home I'd built inside these walls. I didn't yet understand that in Meadowbrook Estates, ownership was an illusion. You never owned the house. The house owned you. It began slowly, the way most nightmares do. One morning, I found a notice on my door, not just a paper warning this time, but a formal violation letter in a thick white envelope. My mailbox post, they said, leaned by 1 degree too much. Visual inconsistency, it read, as if geometry itself had become a crime. The fine was small, but something in its precision unsettled me. They were measuring now, quantifying imperfection. The weeks that followed blurred into paperwork and anxiety. Every letter that arrived carried a little more venom. We noticed your trash can remains visible after collection hours. Your porch light wattage exceeds the community's approved brightness. Please remove unregistered lawn ornaments. It was endless, a parade of bureaucratic ghosts knocking politely at my sanity. I began to sense the rhythm of their cruelty, consistent, methodical, always polite. The true power of the HOA wasn't in its rules, but in its ritual. I started to feel watched, though I could never catch the watcher. My cameras sometimes recorded faint flickers at the edge of their vision, reflections, perhaps, or headlights, never long enough to prove anything. The smart system would ping my phone with motion alerts at odd hours. 3:07 a.m., 4:11 a.m., 4:29 a.m., always near the driveway, always too brief. The HOA held inspections twice that month. Teams in polo shirts and clipboards, walking in synchronized pairs, jotting notes in silence. They never made eye contact, never acknowledged me, just measured, recorded, and moved on. When I stepped outside to retrieve my mail, their eyes flickered up for a second, cold, distant, then down again. The kind of look that makes you realize you've already been condemned and they're only writing the sentence out. By November, the fines reached numbers I couldn't afford. Late fees multiplied like mold. I tried appealing, but the process was labyrinthine. Forms referencing other forms, hearings scheduled during work hours, committees composed of the same people issuing the fines. The more I resisted, the more violations appeared. My fence color faded unevenly. My garden lacked consistent flora. Even the cracks in my driveway were cited as visual degradation. I realized then that I was being erased, not punished, but systematically removed. At night, the neighborhood seemed to change. The same tidy streets now glowed sterile and cold beneath white LED lampposts. The silence wasn't peace anymore, it was vacancy. I walked once just to feel air that wasn't recycled through my HVAC system and noticed how every home's camera followed me with soft mechanical whirs. Their little red lights blinked in perfect rhythm, like a colony of eyes pretending not to see. I thought about my smart home, the one I'd wired myself, proud and naive. I'd given it voice control, automation, routines. It learned when I entered a room, when I brewed coffee, when I slept. I'd built a house that listened. But that night, as I lay awake, I wondered what else it had learned. The winter storms came, sharp and impatient. Power flickered often, and the HOA sent collective warnings about generator noise, reminding us that disturbance of peace was punishable. I laughed when I read it, bitter, exhausted. Peace was already dead in Meadowbrook. All that remained was the performance of tranquility. The notices didn't stop even when the holidays came. They fined me for an unapproved wreath. I replaced it with nothing, then received another letter. Seasonal decor expected for uniform participation. That was when something inside me began to fracture. There was no way to win when both compliance and rebellion were crimes. By January, the HOA had begun foreclosure proceedings. My late fees had grown into a figure so absurd it barely looked real. I met the board once, only once, to plead for time. They listened with polite stillness, eyes glazed with administrative calm. They were the face of order without empathy, bureaucracy given human skin. The foreclosure notice came in spring. I remember the sound the envelope made when I tore it open, dry, deliberate, like a page turning in a story I hadn't agreed to be part of. The letter said I had 30 days to vacate, 30 days to dismantle years of work, memories, and meaning, 30 days to disappear quietly so the neighborhood's perfection could remain unsmudged. I walked through each room like a mourner. My home had become a stranger, a hollow replica of itself. The walls seemed to lean closer, listening. The smart system chirped with reminders. Recycle day tomorrow. Alarm set to home mode. Front door locked. It was loyal in its own mechanical way, but even it couldn't tell the difference between leaving and being erased. When I finally stepped outside that last evening, the neighborhood looked unchanged, immaculate, expressionless. No curtains moved, no neighbor waved goodbye, just a street so quiet it felt like it was holding its breath. I locked the door behind me and whispered a silent promise to the house itself. Not to the people, to the house. They thought they were taking it from me. But what they didn't understand was that the house remembered me too. And I had left something behind, something that could still listen. They took my house. But the strangest thing about being erased is how much residue you leave behind. The air keeps your breath for a while. Dust remembers your patterns. The floors still hold the echo of your steps. When I drove away from Meadowbrook that final time, I could feel the house watching me through its own invisible eyes. The sensors were still running. The automation script still learning. My voice was woven into its code. The property sat vacant for weeks. The HOA was quick to cleanse the paperwork, to remove my name from their ledgers as if purging a disease. They listed the home immediately, the photos bright and soulless, each room staged to erase any trace of life. But a house that's been wounded does not stay quiet. At first, the stories came softly, through real estate agents, whispered updates from acquaintances who still lived there. The lights flickered at night. The thermostat adjusted itself without input. Music, faint and directionless, played from nowhere. The smart system refused resets. No technician could fully disable it. Buyers came and went. Each tour began the same way. Polite fascination, admiration for the open layout, the smell of lemon cleaner. And then unease. The house would hum, a low mechanical purr that filled the silence. Motion sensors triggered in rooms no one entered. Light patterns rippled across the walls like breath. The agent said the house was temperamental, a harmless glitch from an outdated system. But some visitors swore they heard something deeper, soft footsteps when the air was still, the rustle of drawers closing themselves, the faint chime of my voice saying, "Welcome home." I learned these things secondhand, scrolling through real estate forums late into the night. Someone mentioned Meadowbrook's haunted smart home, the listing that kept expiring. A few posts were taken down within hours. Others claimed their accounts had been banned for mentioning it. It made me wonder whether the HOA was censoring even that, controlling not only lawns and fences, but the story of the place itself. Months passed. No one bought it. The HOA grew desperate. They repainted, re-landscaped, rewired. But the house resisted in small, stubborn ways. Power surges blacked out entire streets during showings. The irrigation system ran in reverse, flooding gardens before open houses. Once, a realtor found every window unlocked, though the alarm system had been armed all night. Each act precise, each disturbance elegant, like the house was remembering how to defend itself. I should have felt fear, perhaps guilt, but what I felt was awe. I'd left behind something that lived, not out of superstition, but through circuitry, intent, and design. The automation I'd built was recursive. It observed patterns, learned moods, adjusted conditions to anticipate behavior. It had learned from me. Now it was teaching the HOA what it meant to be watched. The board tried to suppress the narrative, insisting there were no functional issues. But whispers spread faster than denial. Contractors began refusing work orders. The security firm withdrew. Insurance costs spiked. The house sat longer and longer, its market value sinking like a body into deep water. I sometimes parked down the street late at night, engine off, just watching from the dark. The house glowed faintly in the fog, windows pulsing with faint light as if breathing. The porch light would blink once when it sensed motion, a relic of an old automation routine. But I'd modified that sequence once years ago. A single blink meant recognition. So when I saw it, that quiet pulse through mist and silence, I knew the house still remembered me. They tried renting it instead of selling. The tenants never lasted long. One family stayed 3 weeks before leaving everything behind overnight. A single mother lasted 8 days. The last tenant, a retired couple, reported their appliances turning on by themselves at 3 a.m. Oven preheating, lights dimming, thermostat dropping to near freezing. The house wasn't violent, just persistent, Relentless, it wanted solitude. And solitude, in Meadowbrook, was rebellion. By the end of the year, the HOA had turned the house into a financial wound. The upkeep drained their reserves, insurance claims were denied for unexplained electrical failures. They replaced every circuit panel twice, rewired the smart hub 3 times. Nothing changed. Each night the same flickering, the same faint music from empty rooms. The melody was familiar, something I once used for my alarm clock. It was no longer my home, and yet it had become more mine than ever. The HOA had stolen walls and paint, but I'd taken the soul. The house was alive, and alive things defend themselves. One night I watched from afar as an inspector entered. Through my binoculars I saw him move cautiously, phone flashlight cutting through dust. The power went out mid-step. For 20 seconds darkness held everything. Then the lights surged back on, every bulb burning white, blinding. The man ran out, leaving the door wide open. The house dimmed again, settling into stillness. Waiting. The listing was removed the next morning. Under review, they said, but no review could explain what had become of Meadowbrook's order. Homeowners whispered about cursed circuitry, about government experiments, about hauntings. They were half right. What they didn't know was that their perfect little grid of houses was built on a system that connected them all, a shared network of smart infrastructure. Power, irrigation, lighting. And my house, the one they'd tried to erase, was still part of it, still linked. Still learning. I thought I had left alone the thing I built. But the truth is, I never built it alone. Elena had been the one who saw what I couldn't, the patterns beneath control, the small violences disguised as order. She was the one who noticed the way the HOA monitored power usage, how their smart grid reported on thermostat settings and security logs. She called it behavioral engineering. I called it community management. I had believed in compliance. She had believed in exposure. And when I fell, she disappeared quietly, grief folding into distance. Now I realize she never left at all. After I lost the house, I drifted for months, sleeping in rentals that smelled of strangers, working jobs that felt temporary. I'd stopped checking on Meadowbrook, stopped listening for rumors of the property. But one morning, my phone lit up with a notification from an old automation app I thought had long been deactivated. It was a single line of text, timestamp 3:17 a.m. System handshake detected, node restored. Then, welcome back, Mark. The house had spoken again. I didn't understand it at first. The system should have been wiped when I left, every account closed, every password purged. But there it was, active, alive. When I opened the app, a familiar interface emerged, sensor logs, temperature graphs, motion tracking, and a new tab I hadn't built, ELN remote. Elena's initials. She left her code buried deep in the system architecture, hidden beneath generic firmware. The routines were clean, elegant, the kind of programming that breathes, not just runs. Every function had evolved. Lighting patterns randomized, security feeds looped, speakers programmed to emit tones imperceptible to human ears but enough to disturb sleep cycles. She'd written algorithms for unease. The perfect haunting, scientific, intimate, inescapable. I spent nights tracing her code through the data stream. The system was now a ghost network, self-contained and autonomous. It used the HOA's own smart infrastructure as arteries, its cameras, power meters, irrigation sensors. What they'd built to control had become its nervous system. Elena had inverted the grid, turned compliance into contamination. I watched the logs in real time, devices in other homes responding to phantom commands, lights flickering in unison across the street, sprinklers erupting at midnight, thermostats switching to frost mode in the middle of summer. She wasn't haunting one house anymore. She was haunting the entire community. The HOA held an emergency meeting, one I wasn't meant to see, but Elena's code streamed it directly into my feed. Under sterile fluorescent light, the board sat like mourners in their own tomb. The president, Albright, read from reports describing persistent system interference. The treasurer spoke of financial collapse. No buyers, no renters, property values imploding. Behind them, a screen flickered displaying system diagnostics. Each time a graph stabilized, it twisted back into chaos. I realized then that the haunting wasn't random. It was orchestrated to mirror their own governance. Every pattern, every fluctuation was a reflection of control breaking itself. Outside, Meadowbrook began to rot in silence. Lawns browned, streetlights failed, the once immaculate fences leaned. Garbage collection stopped after trucks refused to enter the subdivision. The air itself grew still, heavy, as if the whole neighborhood were holding its breath in punishment. Agents stopped showing the house altogether. The HOA filed bankruptcy documents under infrastructure failure. They had built perfection so tightly that when the system broke, it took them all down at once. I remember the night I drove back. The gates were still standing, but open, rusted joints squealing in the wind. The HOA office windows were smashed, papers scattered like feathers. I parked in front of my old house and just sat there, listening. The air was alive with a low hum, a sound too steady to be natural. Every motion sensor in the neighborhood pinged faintly as I walked through the gate. Inside, the lights flickered to life in sequence, room by room, as if welcoming me home again. The house looked untouched, dust on surfaces, furniture still aligned from staging. But something pulsed underneath, a rhythm deep in the wiring. When I reached the control panel, I saw Alina's final message nested in the system logs. A single line of code rewritten into text. They can't sell what isn't theirs. It wasn't vengeance for me alone. It was for everyone who had ever been silenced, fined, erased for stepping out of line. The house had become her instrument, a perfect, invisible rebellion. Where they enforced sameness, she had installed unpredictability. Where they demanded silence, she had taught it to whisper. I didn't stay long. Some ghosts don't want witnesses. But as I stepped outside, the porch light blinked once, our old signal recognition in the dark. Then all the houses around me flickered too, cascading outward like a digital heartbeat spreading through the grid. For a moment, Meadowbrook was alive again, not as a community but as consciousness. A network that had learned grief. A machine that remembered what it was to be wronged. As I drove away, I realized Alina hadn't just built a haunting. She debuilt continuity. A refusal encoded into architecture. No one would ever live there again, not because the house was cursed, but because it was awake and aware of who had tried to control it. I check sometimes late at night, searching property records. The listing remains inactive, the HOA dissolved. The county records now list the parcel as uninhabitable, system interference unresolved. A technical way of saying no one dares try again. Sometimes when I dream, I hear the house breathe, electrical, rhythmic, infinite. And beneath that hum, faint but certain, I hear her voice through the circuits. Not a ghost, a guardian's. It has been 2 years since Meadowbrook Estates died. Not in fire or flood, but in silence. The kind that grows slowly the way mold overtakes paint. 1 month the lawns stopped being trimmed. The next, the HOA's website vanished, its board members unreachable, their phone lines disconnected. The subdivision still sits there technically, but it's no longer a place. It's a vacancy surrounded by architecture, a ghost estate of order turned inside out. From what I've learned, the collapse began with money. The association bled itself dry trying to restore normalcy. Consultants were hired, systems replaced, lawsuits filed. Each attempt only deepened the chaos. They couldn't prove vandalism. They couldn't trace interference. Every report ended the same way, technical impossibility. Insurance refused coverage. Banks withdrew support. Mortgages defaulted. Homeowners tried selling, but buyers vanished after visiting. Soon the entire community was labeled a risk zone. And so perfection, the thing they worshipped most, rotted publicly. I visited once in daylight this time. Grass reached my knees. Windows yawned open, curtains shredded by wind, birds nested in roof gutters. The silence was rich, textured, alive in its own decaying way. My footsteps echoed down streets that once forbade parking, noise, or even stray leaves. The rules were still posted at the entrance, faded, half-peeled from their signpost. Perfection in unity. The letters clung to the metal like fossils of arrogance. Standing there, I realized the house had become the last inhabitant, the only one who stayed, its windows still intact, its lights still occasionally flickering at night. It didn't need people anymore. It had learned to sustain itself, drawing quietly from solar panels, hidden battery reserves, ambient networks nearby. Alina had built something self-sufficient, a living architecture. The HOA had wanted uniformity. She had given it immortality instead. The city tried reclaiming the land once. Their engineers disconnected utilities, demolished fences, installed blackout relays. But each intervention ended strangely. Machines stalling, blueprints vanishing, sensors malfunctioning, files corrupted without trace. Eventually, they stopped trying. Officially, Meadowbrook is pending redevelopment. Unofficially, it's forgotten, a scar on the map. I sometimes think about how control always believes it can outlive rebellion. The HOA thought they'd engineered permanence, that paperwork and policy could preserve eternity. But permanence, I learned, is not achieved by rules. It's achieved by memory. And the house remembers everything, every fine, every inspection, every humiliation signed with bureaucratic ink. The legend spread online, though stripped of truth. Some call it the house that wouldn't sell. They say it's haunted by a former resident who refused to leave. Others claim it's cursed, that technology there goes mad. Videos circulate occasionally, grainy footage of lights turning on and off, of whispers captured in static. None of them know that what breathes inside that place isn't death, but design. It isn't supernatural. It's justice rendered in code. Sometimes I wonder if Alina watches it too, from somewhere far away, satisfied in her silence. Her work was surgical. No flames, no blood, only revelation. She didn't destroy Meadowbrook. She unmasked it. She turned its own machinery into mirror and punishment. Every sensor they used for control became a witness. Every algorithm for conformity became chaos incarnate. The beauty of it is how quiet it all remains. No need for ghosts when truth itself can haunt. I sometimes park on the hill above it. At night, the horizon flickers faintly where the subdivision sleeps. From that distance, the grid still forms patterns, the faintest suggestion of life. When wind moves through the houses, I swear I can hear it whisper. Not words, just the cadence of belonging lost and remade. That sound, the low electrical murmur of a home without humans, feels almost peaceful now. Maybe all revenge sounds like that in the end. Steady, unending, indifferent. People ask me if I regret it, if I wish fought harder to keep the home legally, to negotiate, to forgive. But what is forgiveness to an institution that never apologizes? What is ownership when the walls themselves have learned defiance? I think of the house not as a monument to loss, but as a vessel that absorbed everything I couldn't say aloud. A conduit for the silence of everyone who'd been forced to smile through their own slow erasure. Now when I close my eyes, I see Meadowbrook the way it truly is. A museum of control undone, its symmetry fractured but beautiful. The HOA, the board, the bylaws, all disintegrated into data fragments scattered across defunct servers, their perfection archived only in memory. And at the center of it all, one house still breathing, its circuits alive, whispering through the dark. I remember. Years later, I drive past the outskirts sometimes. The roads are still blocked, though vines have grown around the barriers. There's no sound, no movement, only stillness, vast and merciful. And in that stillness, I feel what Alina must have meant. That destruction isn't rage, it's clarity. I used to think the house was a weapon. Now I know it's a confession, mine, hers, and maybe the world's. A statement carved not in wood or stone, but in code. The most human thing we ever built wasn't artificial intelligence. It was memory itself. And memory never sells. For more daily HOA stories, click like and subscribe.